Welcome to the Genius Looks Like This podcast. I'm your host, Venus, founder of Venus Souls, your intelligent leadership executive coach for women. And I'm here to remind you of the power of your own genius. And with your genius, you can stand in your power and empower. You can rise and you can raise. You can live with passion and impassion. Each episode, I'll be getting up close and personal with genius women from all over the world, as well as your weekly dose of motivation so that you too can realize your own genius. And be inspired to be the intelligent leader you were born to be. I just want to quickly remind you that if you haven't already, make sure you hit the subscribe button in your favourite podcast app. And don't forget to rate and review the show and send us your comments and questions at info@venussouls.net. This is a podcast about geniuses and leaders who make a dent in the world of business and in people's lives. We ask daring questions like, where are all the female leaders gone? How can we lead better in a landscape that's rapidly changing? And is it possible to lead with soul and create abundant wealth? These questions and more on the Genius Looks Like This podcast. If you believe you have a genius and would like a free executive coaching session to find out how to realize it, email us at info@venussouls.net with subject heading podcast. And now, on with the show. Okay. Hello, good morning and welcome to another episode of Genius Looks Like This. Today I have a very unique genius and I'm really, really excited about introducing her to you. Her name is Sara Price. She is the founder of an organization called Actually. And in a moment, you'll find out exactly what it's all about. But what's unique about Sara is that she has a genius that is truly like a superpower. All that's missing from Sara is a cape and a superhero name. But I'll let her tell you more about what amazing genius she's got. Sara, welcome to Genius Looks Like This. I'm so excited to have you here. You are someone who is incredibly inspirational to me, and I can't wait to share your wisdom with the rest of the world.
Oh, thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be here. I'm really excited.
Thank you, and so am I. So tell us a little bit about your journey, because your journey is so unique and so inspiring.
Okay, so I'm going to go right the way back. So let's go right the way back to me aged about 5. And I was an inveterate bookworm. You know, one of those kids that basically read everything, the back of cereal packets. You know, I used to read the newspaper. By the time I was about 8, I'd worked my way through every single book on my parents' bookshelves, irrespective of the fact that my mother was slightly concerned about me reading Jackie Collins. And I had this love of words. And I remember being about, I don't know, maybe 6, 7 years old, and I was in the school playground, and there was this younger girl who was being bullied by some older boys, and I heard her say, in that, you know, that very shaky voice where you're trying so hard to be brave, but you're just not really. And I heard her say, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me." And I ran across the school playground to try and help her out. And as I was running, I just kept thinking, what a load of old nonsense, who told her that? Because even at that age, I knew how incredibly powerful words were. And yes, they could hurt you, but also what I knew was that words had the capacity to create and change worlds. Because every time I picked up a book, that's what they did for me. They created a whole world that I essentially moved into for the duration of reading that book. And that world changed with every page. So I guess it's not really surprising that I grew up to work in communications and in PR. And so my one moment of teenage rebellion, everybody in my family thought I should be a lawyer, because apparently I'm very argumentative. And my one moment of teenage rebellion was that I studied politics instead. And in fact, I filled out my university application form and applied for politics without really telling anybody. My father was absolutely horrified when he found out. And I went off to university and I studied politics, and then I did a master's in political economy. And when I left, I went to work in Parliament, which was extraordinary and a far more inspiring place than I think it is today. And then I went to work for Unicef. And whilst I was with Unicef, I went out to West Africa and I worked in Ghana for a while, just really observing projects to be better able to communicate about them back in the UK. And I went to the slums in Accra, in Ghana, some of the largest and most poverty-stricken slums in the whole of Africa. And I met a woman running a mother and baby clinic right in the centre of this enormous shanty town. And she was pretty much single-handed. And she was providing nutrition and providing life-saving food and medical help and health education and vaccination, and single-handedly changing the world of these children and their families. And no matter how boring that job got on the occasional day, you know, everybody has those days when the job is really dull. The thought of that woman and the work that she was doing, and the fact that the money that we raised and the work that we did enabled her to do that, kept me going on even those days when the job was, you know, boring or annoying, or I was tired and, you know, I didn't want to go to work. And I loved it. And so I brought together, in a way, the idea that words could change the world and create worlds, and also that individuals could have a significant difference, could make a real impact on the world and on the lives of other people. And then, unfortunately, I couldn't pay my rent because, you know, we don't value people that work in the third sector in this country, and we don't value nurses or doctors or teachers or anyone that's really making a massive contribution to society. And you know, I had this come to Jesus conversation with my bank manager back in the days when you met your bank manager. And he said, you've either got to get a better paid job or you're going to have to leave London, because I was going more and more into debt every single month, just paying my rent, paying my travel card, you know, buying food. And so I had to leave, and I took the decision to leave Unicef. And I was really quite devastated. I mean, I was probably 27, 28 years old, and it was the best job I'd ever done. It was only my second ever job, but I absolutely loved it. And I promised myself on the day that I left the office, I promised myself that I would go back, that one day when I could afford to do it, I would do that kind of world-changing work again. And fast forward 20 years, and that's kind of what I'm doing now.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. And I was telling you earlier, your genius seems to be quite complex. It's not just, you're not just passionate about words and communication, which is, you know, your power of using words is quite remarkable and obvious in your line of work, but also the fact that you utilize it to create change in the world. You use it to go out, find people who need help, and go and help them. What drives you to do that? I mean, I know you mentioned the story of the woman in the middle of slum who cares for babies and mothers, but what, you still have that drive in you, even without that woman appearing in your life. I think that there was a drive for you anyway. That woman just made it visible for you.
Yeah, I think I remember when I was a child, I had two catchphrases. that my mum used to joke I should have tattooed on my forehead, because I said them so often. And one of them was why. I was the original child who asked why of everything. I wanted to understand everything.
Mhm.
But also there was an underlying thing there, which was I had a sort of slight refusal to just accept the status quo. You know, people would say, this is the way it is. And I would say, yes, but why? That doesn't make any sense. I don't understand. So I was constantly someone who wanted to understand the deeper reasoning behind things, and also wanted things to be justified, wanted things to be substantiated. It's like, you know, no, I'm not simply going to accept that that's the way it is. I want to know why. And if the reason and if the answer isn't, in my 8-year-old opinion, justifiable, then I think we should change it. Because my other catchphrase was, it's not fair. So even as a young child, I had this burning hatred of injustice, unfairness, inequity that really drove me. So, you know, the reason why that little girl ran across the playground to help this other girl was, yes, because she was being bullied, but also because she was being bullied by like 2 or 3 people, and that just wasn't fair. You know, so I have always been driven by that hatred of unfairness and injustice, and always felt that it was important to try and tackle that wherever we could. And then I also have this innate rebellion against what I think of as the helpless and hopeless mindset. And you know, we do live in a world and in a culture that is quite negative and quite cynical and quite pessimistic, which is fed by the bad news sells aspects of the media. And where it's an understandable response when you think that the world is going to hell in a handbasket. It's a completely understandable response to sort of throw your hands up in despair and feel hopeless and helpless. But I seem to be genetically incapable of doing that. And I have a fundamental belief that change is possible and that every individual can create change, and that optimism wins, that everyone has the power within them to create change in their own world as well as in the world at large. And that just feels to me like a more constructive, a more positive, a more fulfilling, a more joyful way of going through life, believing that change is possible, believing that optimism is the way forward, believing that you can create change in your own life, than the alternative, than throwing your hands up and saying it's all too difficult and, you know, I can't make a difference. And so that's what I want to do. I want to get that message across to people that, you know, you can change things. And, you know, I envisage a world in which everybody knows without question that they can make a difference, that their voice counts, that their vote counts, that they are capable of creating change.
Could you please run for Parliament?
I very nearly did, actually, once upon a time, a very long time ago.
Oh, really? Well, reconsider it, please. once you know that actually is independent and can work on its own, definitely you've got my vote. Because what you've got there, you've got a genius and you've got a passion, and you know this is the makeup of a true superhero and someone who really can create change in the world that we live in. And you've got a vision as well, so you are unstoppable, really, which is why you founded Actually.
Well, I'm not sure about unstoppable, but let's hope so. And yes, it is why I founded Actually. As I said, you know, if you go back to that woman who left Unicef and made that promise, and 20 years later, I mean, don't get me wrong, I've had an amazing career. I've done lots of incredible things and wonderful jobs. I've had some amazing bosses. And, you know, 9.5 years ago, I started a PR agency, co-founded it with one of my closest friends. And it's been extraordinarily successful. You know, it's an award-winning agency. It's probably one of London's fastest growing independent communications agencies. So it's not as though in the 20 years in between leaving Unicef and starting Actually, I was either twiddling my thumbs or deeply depressed because I wasn't changing the world. You know, I was doing great things and really, really enjoying it. But I started to think, you know, look, I'm in a very fortunate position. I have a great job. I have a lovely home. I can afford this now. And if I don't do it soon, I probably never will. And my dad said to me when I was a kid, and I remember it really, really clearly, I remember him saying to me that the saddest words in the English language were "what if?" That, you know, you should do everything in your life to avoid getting to the end of your life and saying, what if I'd started that business? What if I'd bought that house? What if I'd married that man? What if I'd, you know, traveled around Africa? What if? And I knew that if I didn't do something about going back and doing that kind of world changing work again, that would be my biggest what if. So about a year ago, I sat down with this huge sheet of paper and a Sharpie pen, and I wrote a list of all the things that I was passionate about, all the causes that I was passionate about, all the campaigns, the charities, the causes and campaigns that I wanted to contribute to in some way. And there were about 100 things on that list. So everything from plastics in the ocean to supporting Oxfam to gender equality to health inequality to education. I mean, just name a cause and it was on that list. And I remember sitting there being slightly overwhelmed and thinking, how am I going to choose? You know, how do you choose between ending child labour and protecting the environment? And I've always had a slight sort of envy of those people who have one clear passion and that's it. You know, I am all about saving the environment. That's my thing. I'm going to dedicate my whole life to it. Because I honestly, I sat there with that sheet of paper and I couldn't choose. I was like, I simply can't choose between, you know, children and the environment, between gender equality and health. I mean, how do you choose? And I got myself into a bit of a tiz about it. And then a combination of things happened and conversations that I had with, you know, amazing, inspiring people. And I woke up one morning and realized that I didn't actually have to choose. Because instead, I could take 25 years of communications and PR experience and apply it to helping other people to make their difference. And that way I could have an impact, but I could also cross things off my list of 100.
Yes.
Which is now 101, but we'll come back to that in a minute. So that's what Actually is all about. Actually is about working with social entrepreneurs, working with charities, working with campaigning groups, working with people with a big vision who want to change the world, but who don't necessarily have the communications expertise or experience to be able to do that, to be able to spread the word, to get their voice heard, to inspire other people with their vision and their mission, and don't necessarily have the resource to employ an agency like mine to help them. And so what Actually does is we train people in communications and in communication skills and communication strategy. And we do advisory and consulting work for those organisations as they build their own capacity to get out there and communicate. Because ultimately that's what it's all about. If you want to change the world, if you want to have an impact, then you need people to care, because you need people to come alongside you and work with you. And the only way you're going to make people care is if you know how to communicate with them, if you can inspire them with your communication. And you know, people go into, I don't know, cleaning oceans because they're passionate about the ocean and they're passionate about removing plastics from the ocean. They don't go into it because they're passionate about communication. And they don't necessarily have You know, I've met hundreds, if not thousands, of change makers around the world who are amazing people with incredible vision, but there are very few of them that are brilliant communicators. So that's what I want to do. I want to create a world full of brilliant communicators who are changing the world.
Wow. I'm breathless just listening to you talk about it, you know. You're incredibly empowering, and it's, wow, what a vision to have and what a purpose to have in life.
Thank you.
Well done. And I really feel deeply honored to be able to have you here on my show and to talk to you and listen to you talk about it. You will change the world. You already are. You know that.
I hope so. I hope so.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we'll talk more about that after the podcast as well, because I think we can definitely do some great work together. Tell my listeners about the story that you told me. We won't name the charity, but you went into a charity, and I just thought it was a brilliant story.
Sure. So this was one of the other catalysts for deciding that it was time to get back to doing the world-changing work. I was invited to go and speak to a charity about how they should celebrate their 150th, I think it was, anniversary. And I think I must have been in quite a grumpy mood that particular day. But I went to see them, and I sat down, and they said, so, you know, we want to do some big celebrations. We want to have a party. We want to do this. We want to do that. You know, and we'd love to get your take on it and some creative ideas, and how could we generate media coverage and media interest. And I said, okay, what exactly are you celebrating? And they said, well, you know, we've been going for 150 years, and, you know, da, da, da. And I said, so that's 150 years where you have one single purpose, and for 150 years you've failed to achieve that purpose. And they said, sorry, what now? And I said, the very fact that you still exist 150 years later means you've failed to deliver the one thing you exist to do. So what you want to do is celebrate 150 years of failure. Now, I didn't put it quite as boldly as that, because, you know, I'm a consultant and we're always trying to be tactful. But it did actually really irritate me that an organisation would spend tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds celebrating itself, and celebrating the fact that it's been in existence for 150 years. If you've only got one purpose, let's say, for the sake of argument, that your purpose is, I don't know, to stop children living in poverty, and you've been going at it for 150 years, and there are still millions of children living in poverty, what are you celebrating? What exactly are you celebrating?
A very valid question.
And wouldn't it be more appropriate, and this was the suggestion that I made to them, wouldn't it be more appropriate, instead of celebrating 150 years of existence, and therefore celebrating 150 years in which children have continued to be poor, or whatever, you know, your particular cause is, you use that opportunity and those thousands of pounds that you would have spent on a party, actually developing a programme that's going to solve the problem. And going to the media and saying, our intention is that we no longer exist as an organisation in another 50 years, or another 5 years, or another 10 years. Because we are now developing this programme that is going to solve the problem. And I know that, you know, there were some quite shocked faces in the room, and there was a long conversation about how complicated it is and how difficult it is to create lasting change, and how much kind of internecine warfare there is within the sector, and how hard it is to raise enough money to tackle things. And I get all of that. You know, I worked in the sector for a long time, and I understand that, and I understand that change is difficult, but it's not impossible. And what is required is some innovative, creative thinking, some collaboration and cooperation, and great communications. And one of the things that really interested me when I left Unicef, A lot of people in the third sector were very dismissive and quite cross, and thought that I was selling out, and that I was going to, and that I would hate it, that I would hate the private sector because it was so nasty and it was so competitive and it was so awful. I have to say that I've seen more openly ruthless competitiveness within the so-called third sector and the non-profit sector than I ever did in the corporate world.
Really?
And I believe we have a sort of cultural paradigm that is very much about competition and individualism, and it's very much about that kind of determined, push on through, quite masculine approach to things. And that seems to have been adopted wholesale and without question in most parts of our society, including in the third sector. And so there's a huge amount of competition for resources. There's a huge amount of competition to be the leading charity, the leading campaign, the leading organisation in a particular area. We do better work on children than you do. We do better work helping people with disability than you do. And I look at the sector and think, is that really the kind of paradigm that we want to create? Is that really the sort of culture that creates the most innovative, best solutions? Don't we already know, actually, that collaboration and cooperation are much more productive and much more likely to result in kind of long-term positive solutions than that sort of competitive,
bickering?
Yes. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And this is the thing that I've been noticing. So growing up, it was all about let's save Africa and let's put a stop to hunger in Africa or thirst in Africa or whatever. And 40 years on, it's still the same. Nothing's really changed, and it makes me, the child in me who was always seeing this on TV, is wondering, so what have they actually done? What's actually changed? And all that's really changed that I've witnessed is there's been replicant charities and organizations saying saying the exact same thing, just in different words and different under different logos. But what's actually changing? And I can't help but think, what if they collaborated and put their powers together? Surely the impact will be 100 times fold more effective. And actually we can eradicate hunger or thirst or whatever across the world, not just in one continent.
Yeah,
there's enough to go around.
And that's not to take away from the fact that these charities are doing incredible work.
Yeah.
I wrote a blog yesterday, which will go out next week, where it's the International Day of the Girl Child on the 11th of October. And so I've written a blog about 3 organisations that I think are doing amazing work, and that I would love people to support. And they're doing incredible work. If you look at the work that Unicef, my old employer, is doing around the world, they are an extraordinary organisation that are literally saving lives every single day. If you look at Girls Not Brides, which is another organisation that I have recommended, again, bringing together people to end child marriage. Something like 12 million girls in the world are married under the age of 15.
That's ridiculous.
That's just like outrageous to me. Anyway, I've probably got that statistic wrong, but it's extraordinary to me that in this day and age we still think that that's acceptable. But one of the reasons why I have recommended the organisations that I have, so the 3 I've recommended are UNICEF, Girls Not Brides, and She Decides. Now I declare an interest because UNICEF is my former employer and She Decides is a client of mine, actually, at Pagefield, my agency. But the reason I've recommended those 3 organisations is each one of them operates in a really collaborative and constructive way. So She Decides is an international global movement to create a new normal where women and girls have the right to decide without question what to do with their bodies and their lives and their future.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that they work is by amplifying the voice of other organizations. So their whole ethos is built on collaboration, partnership, and not competing. So they don't fundraise. They don't raise money, and they don't distribute money. They exist solely as a mechanism to bring organizations and campaigns together and amplify their voice. Girls Not Brides, again, is a collaboration. They've brought together something like 1,200 different organizations, small local charities and members into one wrapper to, again, amplify that voice. Because what Girls Not Brides understand is, if you have 1,300 different organizations all speaking separately to politicians and to the media, etc., you disperse the voice. Whereas if you unify them all in one place, you speak with one voice, and that one voice has a lot more power and a lot more authority. And then UNICEF, because of the way that UNICEF was established, so UNICEF is one of the very few UN agencies that doesn't get mandatory funding from the United Nations. Right. So it has to fundraise, and it has to ask governments for money every year. It means that it works in a much more collaborative way with governments. And so UNICEF is an organisation that can only go into a country and work in that country with the permission of the government and in collaboration and cooperation with that government. Now, that puts them in a difficult position at times, because it means that they have to cooperate and collaborate with governments that other people don't necessarily approve of. But their overriding aim is to help children, and they don't see it as their job to criticize a specific government. They see it as their job to do what needs to be done to get in there and help the children that need help. And so all three of those organizations, I feel, are operating in that spirit of cooperation, collaboration, community. They've all understood that is where that's where their authority comes from, and that's where the innovation comes from, and that's where that's the path forward. For me, that's Absolutely. How I see it.
I completely agree with you. And do you think that model is a relatively new model that you're seeing there, which, collaboration, cooperation, and so on? Is that relatively new?
I don't think it's new. I think there's always been a part of our society, a part of our culture, and a part of every sector that has collaborated and cooperated. If you look at the cooperative movement, that's always obviously the clues in the name. There's always been a part. If you look at things, even in the corporate world, if you look at organisations like John Lewis and the kind of partnership model of John Lewis, there's always been part of our society and part of our corporate world that has predicated its approach on community and cooperation. What I hope is happening is a gradual paradigm shift, so that model of community, cooperation and collaboration is becoming more and more prevalent and more understood as the more productive way of achieving things.
Absolutely. Okay, so Sara, tell me, if someone who's listening right now wants to go and actually change the world, what are the steps? What would you advise them to do right now?
Wow, excellent question. I think it really depends on, it's not really for me to tell other people what they should do in their lives.
But you've certainly inspired that right now. I'm sure people are listening right now thinking, "Oh, I really want to change the world this particular problem in the world right now."
So I think one of the key things is to have a really clear sense of the change that you're trying to create, because that is what will keep you going on the days when the job is tough, and it is tough. Creating change is hard. So you need to have a very, very clear sense of what you're trying to achieve. And when I work with clients and we develop communication strategies, the very first thing that I get them to do is we talk about purpose. And there's an awful lot of nonsense talked about purpose, and people get caught up in, semantics about, is this your purpose, or is it your vision, or is it your mission, or is it your legacy? And they get very confused, and they sort of go off and spend hours in meditative states trying to work out what their vision is. And I have people come to me all the time. In fact, I had a conversation with someone last week who said, I really want to change the world, but I'm not clear what my vision is and what my purpose is, and until I've got that clarity, I don't really know what I should do. So there are two things that I would say about that. So first of all, yes, it is absolutely critical to have clarity about what it is you're trying to achieve, and that will inspire you on the days when it's tough. And the thing that I do with people to help them to develop that clarity is I say, okay, forget about your lifetime. Because when you think about what you can achieve as an individual or even as an organization in the next 20 to 30 years, let's say, you get bogged down by practicalities, and you get bogged down by the kind of impossibility of things. I'd love to be able to solve world hunger, but I'm not going to be able to do that in the next 20 years. Okay, we can have a debate about whether or not that's true, but I understand that there is that constraint in the way that we think. So forget about your lifetime. Go forward 100 years into the future. So it's beyond your lifetime. And look at the world in 100 years' time, and look at what has changed in that world as a result of what you do today. So what you do today doesn't have to deliver results this year or in the next 5 years or in your lifetime. Look at the results that work will deliver 100 years in the future. And it somehow frees up people's minds to really imagine the possibilities, to kind of step into that realm of possibility, because it takes the pressure off of what do I have to achieve right now? What can I do in the next 5 minutes, in the next 5 years?
Yes.
So that's the first thing that I say to people in that sort of space of, I want to change the world, but I don't know how. And then the second thing that I say to people, which is right at the other end of the spectrum, is take one step. Just take one step. Because when you're feeling, when you've got that sort of hopeless and helpless thing going on, my voice doesn't count, I can't create change, one person can't change the world, or when you've got the fear, and as an entrepreneur, I have come up against the fear more than once. The thing that will flip that, the thing that will give you courage, but also momentum and inspiration, is taking one small step. And it doesn't matter what that step is. It could be writing a blog. It could be having a conversation with somebody about the thing that you're passionate about. It could be, reading that book on cleaning the oceans that you've been meaning to read for ages but never found the time to do. It could be doing a podcast. It doesn't actually matter what it is. The important thing is to take that first step. And what I've learned over the course of, however many years, is taking that one step leads inevitably to the next one. That your degree of commitment, excitement, enthusiasm, vision grows exponentially with every small step that you take. It's like action begets courage, not the other way around. You don't have to be brave to take the first step. You have to take the first step in order to be brave.
Yes.
And so that's what I say to people.
That's amazing. Okay, so I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm thinking, and as an example of what you're saying, and it's inspired by what you said. But so lately, I've been thinking about starting to my vision. Okay, the problem I want to solve in the world is I want every organization in the world to have a section in their organization that employs autistic individuals. Okay,
Mhm.
because the statistics around employability of autistic individuals is so low,
Mhm.
and it contributes to, you know, the mental health of people with autism and so on. And the thing about autistic individuals is they are raw talent and they are raw genius. The
Mhm.
problem is people don't know how to, they don't understand autism, they're not aware of
Mhm.
it, they just think that this
Mhm.
person is weird or awkward, or, you know, that doesn't fit in, um, rather than actually try and get into uh, get, you know, get into understanding what this person is capable of doing, and creating the environment and the atmosphere and the uh, you know, the mentality of knowing how to deal with the autistic people. So
Mhm.
my dream is to have in every organization in the world
Mhm.
a section where they employ autistic individuals who contribute to the work environment and to society and community just like everyone else can.
Mhm.
Um, so, and my first action step is talking
Mhm.
about it
Mhm.
with you. And I,
Amazing.
yeah, and also we'll continue talking about it definitely after the recording. But this is
Mhm.
what I mean. This is the scope of the work that you do, and I'm sure people listening, I'm hoping, and I really encourage them to reach out. I'm going to put all your details on the episode details so that they can reach out to you and find out how they can also actually change the world rather than just talk about it.
Amazing. So, on what you are passionate about,
Mhm.
I'm going to encourage you to think even bigger.
Oh,
So, if you go forward 100 years into the future,
yeah.
imagine a world in which every single person with autism is able to contribute
Mm.
to the world of work, to the world of however you want to put it. Imagine a world in which every autistic individual knows their worth and can contribute to society,
Amazing.
because it's not just it's not just about having an organization being prepared to employ those people.
Hmm.
It's about having people with autism take their rightful place within society
Hmm.
and be recognized and understood, and to recognize and understand their own worth and contribution. And
Yes.
that's the net result of having employers and corporates offer work to people with autism, is
Hmm.
that actually those people get a better understanding of their value and their contribution. So
Yes.
I would encourage you to think about a world in which every autistic individual knows their worth and their value and is able to make their contribution. And that will inspire you on the days when it gets really tough.
Wow. Yes, I am fully inspired and energized about this. So you've kind of given it a new breath of life for me. So can't thank you enough. But
You're
we'll talk
very,
more
very
about
welcome.
it definitely.
Okay.
Sarah, it's been amazing and it, one of the best conversations I've ever had. Truly.
Oh, wow. Thank you. That's really, wow.
Thank you so much. And I'm hoping that our listeners will also, I know for a fact that they will feel the same, but I'm hoping that they will act upon what they've heard today, because I have no doubt that everyone out there wants to create change in the world. I think it's part of our
Yeah.
human nature that we want to contribute. And actually, we will never achieve fulfillment until we feel that we've contributed something to the advancement of our human race.
Yeah. And then, there are three things that people need, I think, in order to be able to create change. You need the right mindset, you
Yes.
need the right skills, and you need the right support. And that's what actually exists to do. So, I'm developing this concept of the change maker mindset, which is about the belief that change is possible, the belief that I can make a difference, the belief that optimism wins, the belief that, you know, with the right mindset, the right skills and the right support, I can change the world. So you need that mindset, and, you know, we do sort of coaching and mentoring and community to help you to create that mindset. You need the right skills. Now, my focus is always going to be on communications and PR skills because that's my, you know, that's my area and that's where my expertise is, but also because I think it's the fundamental building block of creating change.
Absolutely.
But there are other skills that you need. And then you need the right support, because it can be a lonely journey and it can be tough. And in the face of prevailing cynicism and negativity, it's an act of courage to be optimistic and to believe in change.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've had my fair share of people trying to pull me down and to persuade me that I am, you know, naive and crazy. It's an act of courage to hold on to the belief in positivity and optimism. And the easiest way to hold on to that is with support, is with community. And so even if you're not a social entrepreneur, even if you're not running a charity or running a big campaign, or, you know, even if you're not somebody who's actively working in the world of creating change, I would encourage you to join our community, because that's where you'll get the support, and that's your one small step towards you know, getting the courage to take the next step and the next one and the one after that. So, and that community is open to everybody who even has the vaguest inkling that at some point in the future they might possibly want to do something world changing.
Yes, you're right. So is this community online?
So we have a Facebook group that's online, and that's where the community lives at the moment. And if you go to my website, actually, is probably the best way to get there. So if you go to www.actually.world and click join us, then yes, that puts you on our email list, which, by the way, is a spam-free email list. I keep getting told by marketing gurus that, you know, I should be emailing my list every day, and I simply refuse to do it. So, you know, probably not the world's greatest marketing strategy, but never mind. But what you will get is an invitation to then join the Facebook group, and the people in that group are it's a hugely diverse group of people. Some of them are running world-changing businesses. Some of them are, you know, working within amazing charities. But an awful lot of them are, you know, just have this vague idea that maybe someday they want to do some world-changing work. Or they're at the very, very, very beginning of that journey.
Yeah.
And, you know, the group exists to support them.
That's amazing. And actually, I would encourage listeners who are at that phase or stage where they think, okay, I want to create a change in the world, but I don't know what kind of change or where or who. I would encourage them to join that group and join any other groups of people who are already trying to make that change, and be supportive and to offer their support. And just by being there and giving that support, they will be inspired to then find their own genius and their own passion in that realm. And you know, if you can't change the world, then at least support those who are trying.
That's exactly.
Well, Sara, I don't want this conversation to end. Honestly, it's what a great way for me to start my day. Thank you so much. And
me too. Although now I need coffee.
Yeah, yes, I need a hot one too. But thank you so much. And to our listeners, I hope I'm sure you've enjoyed listening to the fabulous Sara Price. And again, if you need to get in touch, I will put all the details of how to get in touch with Sara on the episode brief. And thank you so much for listening, and look forward to having a future episode with Sara, as well as other contributors too. Thank you so much.